Hello, I'm good, thank you. How are you?
Alhamdulillah. Assalamualaikum. For those who are watching now, so the live or recorded, we have our guest today, Brother Yusuf Jamal from Istanbul. I think he's still doing his PhD in Sakarya University in Turkey. Uh, yeah, it's basically he's 5 hours behind Malaysia. Yeah,
Yes,
we are night. They're basically at 3 or 4 in the afternoon. But today we're going to talk about travel restriction in Palestine as a tool of settler colonialism. So basically, our talk now is basically live that will be shared in the FB Live of Hashim Sani Center for Palestinian Studies, and as well as in the BDS YouTube. So please like and comment. You can put your comment or question to Brother Yusuf or anything you want to know. But before we proceed, I think it's apt for me to introduce our speaker for today. Um, Brother Yusuf Al Jamal is a Palestinian refugee from Al Nusrat refugee camp in Gaza Strip. He has obtained his MA degree from the Department of International and Strategic Studies at the University of Malaya. That is in Malaysia. When was that, Yusuf?
2013, 2015.
All right. So how's the 2 years in Malaysia then? Is that okay?
It was fun. I had much nasi goreng and I got to know the Malaysian culture and I made a lot of friends then. Yeah.
All right. All right. So you like nasi goreng. So what's your favorite food there in Malaysia?
Nasi goreng, anything with nasi. So nasi goreng, nasi ayam,
Okay.
roti
You like that?
canai.
All right. Roti Canai. All right. So now he's a PhD candidate at the Middle East Institute of Sakarya University in Turkey. Al Jamal, besides his research interest in diaspora, security, and indigenous studies, he has contributed to a number of books which highlight the Palestinian narrative. He translated two books on Palestinian prisoners entitled The Prisoner's Diary, which I have with me here. You can check it out, and Palestinian Voices from the Israeli Gulag, which is he wrote in 2013, and Dreaming of Freedom. I have this one here. You can get it from Hashim Sani, Center for Palestinian Studies. And if they, what if they want to buy, Yusuf? Where can you get it? We put in Amazon or
So
anything.
yeah, it's on Amazon. It's also available at some bookstores in Kuala Lumpur.
All right. So you just contact us, the Hashim Sani Center. You just email to us. So probably get back to you. And Prisoners Child Speak in 2016. He also co-edited the book of Shared Struggle Stories of Palestinian and Irish Hunger Strikers in 2021. This is quite interesting. Al Jamal has published a number of journal articles on topics that include Palestinians in diaspora, travel restriction imposed in Palestine, struggles for liberations. Over the years, he has spoken at various forums and platforms to highlight the plight of Palestinian living under Israeli military occupation. Yeah, welcome to the stage. Welcome, again to online. But we are more than happy to have you here. Just come to Kuala Lumpur anytime. We're gonna have conference on the from 29 on Palestine conducted by Hashim Sani. Will you be joining us, Yusuf?
Yeah, I'll be presenting a paper online.
On the 30th, so you can catch him later on that, I think, the
Yeah.
30th. 29 will be physical, so do come to our conference. Will be on 29 until 30th. It's 2 days, and we have also invited speaker from, I think, Australia, Peter Slizak, Seju's professor. All right, we go to our topic for tonight. Is basically travel restriction in Palestine as a tool of settler colonialism. Do you want to say a little bit about yourself, that Yusuf, before we proceed? You want to add on?
So I have written in the past about travel restrictions because travel restrictions have impacted my family and the experience of my family under siege and occupation is not unique in the sense that it's also the experience of many Palestinian families. It's the experience of thousands of Palestinians who have been living under separation for more than 74 years, where families were split apart since 1948. And this is still going on today. We have this concept of the ongoing Nakba, the generational aspect of travel restrictions. It's something that my grandfather suffered from, my father suffered from, I am suffering from, and my children in the future will be suffering from. So people have to, I think, understand how it feels for a Palestinian family to live under travel restrictions, not being able to see each other for decades, sometimes for no reason, although they live very close to each other, but then they're separated by geography and they're not allowed to leave as they wish. They need to apply for permits and they are at the mercy of another government when they want to be united to have their natural rights of being together as one collective, one society, one family. So this topic have always or has always interested me because it helps people understand the experience, the Palestinian experience. Very often when we talk about Palestine, Palestinians are reduced into numbers and statistics, and we have to challenge this narrative to tell people that we are a people with a history, with aspirations, with dreams, so that people connect and relate to our experience. When they travel, when they go to airports, they remember that there are millions of Palestinians who cannot freely have this right or practice this right, or where family unification and being able to see your family becomes a dream, a distant dream, unfortunately.
All right. Thanks, Yusuf. But I think that's quite, I think, very generals of if you can give, specific examples. One thing that I think will help people to understand is because Palestinian, for those who don't have prior knowledge, it's very hard for them to imagine. Like even in Palestine, I think they have at least 4 passport and 5 types of Palestine. At least one in probably in Israel proper, they have different passport. They have also their how they move also they're quite more free in certain sense. They got Palestine in Jerusalem where there is Baitul Muqaddis, Al-Aqsa Mosque. That's is where even Malaysia can go there sometimes. So this is probably second type of second tier how they can move in Jerusalem.
Yeah. Actually, what Palestinians have when it comes to travel documents
Yeah.
reminds us of what people in South Africa used to have
Mhm.
under the apartheid regime, where people had different travel documents that allowed them to access or not specific areas. And this is actually very much the case in Palestine. For example, Palestinians who live in the Gaza Strip and the West Bank have the Palestinian passport or travel document issued according to the Oslo Accords of 1948, 1993 between the Palestine Liberation Organization and Israel. Um, and we have also different IDs, although we share the same passports, but your address actually determines how you're treated. So if you are from Gaza, although you hold the same ID and passport, you receive a different treatment. So you have the Gaza ID, and then you have the West Bank ID, and then, as you mentioned, you have the Jerusalem ID, which allows you, for example, to go to the West Bank, but not to Gaza, and to 1948 Palestine, to what is today Israel. And then you have Palestinians who live uh, in Israel itself, who were given Israeli passports in 1966, who have Israeli citizenships, but they are also treated as second class citizens in Israel. But they
Yeah.
still can travel much freely than Palestinians from the West Bank, Palestinians from Jerusalem, Palestinians from Gaza. The worst type of ID a Palestinian would get is the Gaza ID. It's just terrifying the way we get treated. And then
Yeah.
we have another set of IDs and travel documents for Palestinian refugees issued by different Arab countries. such as Egypt, Jordan, Syria, Lebanon. We talk about the situation of Palestinian refugees in Lebanon. This is just a different story. It needs,
All right, Yusuf,
yeah,
Mustafa, if you can hear me in the background, can you just share us, a Google map of Palestine? Wait. This one is just a background. Don't play this one first. If you can just share a Google map of Palestine, so at least they know where is Gaza. Not all people rightfully they know where's Israel. So it's quite. If there's any picture
yeah,
while we are talking, probably you can share later on, so it's easier for people to see. So basically, like you said, there are at least in Palestine, or there is four types of passport with all different uh, what movement restriction. And for probably the fifth one is basically the refugees is outside the Palestinian. Uh,
yeah,
from what I understand is, let's say the first type, you can go down, but you cannot go up. Restriction. I mean, from Jerusalem or from Israel, you can go. I think that the probably the first one will be Israel, and then those living in Jerusalem. But you can
yeah,
downgrade yourself to West Bank or to Gaza. But from
yes,
Gaza, you cannot go to West Bank or Jerusalem. It's
exactly.
only
You need a
downward.
permit. You need a permit to travel from Gaza and the West Bank and
Yeah.
vice versa. But you do not need a permit to travel from Jerusalem into Israel or from Israel into Jerusalem, including if you're Palestinian with an Israeli passport, you can travel to the West Bank as well, but you cannot travel to Gaza. So Gaza is like the most challenging place in terms of travel restrictions. We've
Yes.
been living under siege for the past 15 years, and it's getting worse every day, including patients, cancer patients. They need, travel permits to be able to have medical care, which is otherwise not available in Gaza because of the siege. So people have to wait for Israeli permits to be able to go to hospitals in Jerusalem and the West Bank to receive medical treatment. And many of them pass away, they die waiting for these permits.
Which is in your case, your is it your younger sister who passed away from
My
or
older sister
elder
lost
sister? Yeah.
her life in 2007. She applied for a permit. She needed a minor surgery, which was not available in Gaza again due to the siege. And she waited for 1 week at the hospital and she got a rejection. And this is very common where Palestinians wait and under security claims and reasons, quote unquote, they get rejection. So after waiting for 1 week at the hospital, her health got really bad and she needed to leave Gaza, but the Rafah crossing with Egypt was also shut down. So it took her a few more days until she was finally allowed to leave Gaza through Egypt. And she had the surgery in Cairo, but it was too late for her. Her body was too fragile, too weak to handle the surgery, and she lost her life. She was 26 years old and working for UNRWA and newly married at the time in 2007. And even bringing her body to Gaza was a challenge because the you know, crossings with Gaza or connecting Gaza with the world were also shut down. And my father and aunt who were with her had to, try a couple of times before they were allowed to cross into Gaza, bringing her body in an ambulance every day for 2 days and would be sent back. On the third day, they were allowed to enter Gaza. But again, as I said, the experience of my family and my sister losing her life is not unique. It's the story of hundreds of Palestinian patients who also lost their lives waiting for these permits. It's a whole system of collective punishment where Palestinians have to apply for permits, which is a basic human right to receive treatment.
Yeah.
And it's unfair because it's been going on for years and it's getting worse, as I said, every year. People are losing their lives, and I mean, Palestinians should not apply for permits in the first place to have medical care. It's a basic human right. It shouldn't be subject to permits and policies of collective punishment. Palestinians should Palestinians in Gaza should have access to medical care, whether in Gaza or outside Gaza, any time of the year. They should not be at the mercy of an Israeli officer who decides if they going to get a permit or not. And we have countless stories of patients who, for example, were denied a permit to receive medical care, specifically cancer patients who lost their lives. And in some cases, Israel would give a permit to these patients to have the first chemotherapy session, um, but again, not the second one. So they would blackmail them into collaboration.
Okay, Yusuf, that's your personal story of your sister. Even if for people to understand, like basically, Gaza is the biggest open air prison in the world, which is very cramped. And even if you want to go, it's basically the sea, the air, the land is all blocked. And now, like I said, they monitor by probably by drone. They can shoot you anytime, 24/7. Will be there. And even you cannot even. I think there's crossing. How far is it from you to West Bank from the
So
point?
it's an hour drive, but I have not been in the West Bank for the past probably 22 years.
How
Uh,
old are you now? That was the last time.
I'm 33, so I was I think 10, almost 10 or 9 when I was there for the last time.
Have
And
you
to meet my West Bank family, I had to travel to another country, Jordan, not to the West Bank, because the West Bank is out of reach for many Palestinians from Gaza, especially young people.
So you have to meet your family members at Jordan at neutral place, not in Gaza itself.
Yeah, not in Gaza, not in the West Bank.
Have you ever been to Al-Aqsa Mosque yourself?
No, but I have this distant memory. When I was a little child, we were in Jerusalem.
Mm-hmm.
I was in Jerusalem with my mother, but I was able to see the Dome of the Rock, the Lion's Gate, but that was the only memory I have of Jerusalem and Al-Aqsa. And again, this is the story of all young people in Gaza. Jerusalem is out of reach. The West Bank is out of reach.
Sorry, you have never been there.
Yeah, not inside the compound, but I crossed by, but I was too young.
I see. So it's not. So for people out there, you must know that not all Palestinians have been into Al-Aqsa Mosque. Even from people in West Bank, like you said,
Yeah,
they also don't allow for them. But you know, people it's not many people can understand your situation, your plight, no, unless only then. That's why sometimes with the help of a map that you tell your stories every day.
yeah. I mean, also my mother comes from the West Bank, and she grew up in the West Bank, and she had to change her ID to Gaza when she got married, and it
Mhm.
took her 12 years to get an Israeli permit to see her family. Her parents passed away in 2003, 2008, and she was not able to participate in the funeral procession. Um, and only after 12 years of trying, she got a permit, a 4-day permit to see her family. And according to the conditions of this permit, she quote unquote overstayed because she stayed 32 days in the West Bank. And it was only after human rights organizations petitioned on her behalf before the Israeli Supreme Court that she was given this permit. So it's not easy, and there are exceptional sorry, cases when Palestinians would get these permits, including Palestinians who are originally from the West Bank but living in Gaza and vice versa. So it doesn't matter. And she was given another permit in 2015 because her eldest brother passed away. So only under very strict, situations, and it's also a matter of luck. You never know. Like My grandparents passed away in 2003, 2008. She was not able to get a permit. My mother was able to get a permit 2015 when her eldest brother passed away. So it's very random. You never know why and how it works.
So, audience, listeners, you see, even for Yusuf, uh, it took 10 to 12 years to get permission from Gaza to West Bank to pay visit to her late father who passed away. 10 years just to get permit to to see the grave of late father. That is probably your mother's is probably a lady of some age. But I think for brother Yusuf, who's quite young and handsome, I don't think he will get a permit just to go to the West Bank. So that kind of, you really, the point is, you at the mercy of the military of Israel occupation, not really that you, it's like, you apply for visa, you can get the next day, you can go. No, if they
No,
don't
it's not.
decide you, yeah, they don't like
Yeah,
you, they will not give.
it's very random. And aside from the fact that I am not handsome enough, I think it's a tool of collective punishment, divide and rule. And as I said, it's generational because since 1948, so from 1948, when the catastrophe, the Nakba, befell the Palestinian people, until 1967, so 19 years, when Gaza was under Egyptian rule and the West Bank was under Jordanian rule, Palestinians were also divided. So for my grandfather, he was not able to connect with his extended family for 19 years. And that's why I say it's generational. It's not only one generation. It's been going on. It impacted my grandfather. And now, ironically, in 1967, Palestinians were reunited under Israel's occupation. But this unity, quote unquote, came to an end when the Oslo Accords were signed in 1993, where another system of permit was put in place. And again, Palestinians needed permits to move between Gaza and the West Bank. Moving between Gaza and the West Bank was relatively easy between 1967 and 1993, but again, there were also many cases where Israel would completely shut down the Gaza Strip or kick Palestinian workers out, send them back home. So it was not like a complete safe trip, but it was much easier than today.
So things are
In
getting worse than
in
than yeah.
Yeah, in 1993, we had this system of permits. It was doable, like you would apply, get a permit. There were some, restrictions and conditions, but it was doable until 2000, the year the Second Palestinian Intifada broke out. Things have changed a lot, I think, since then. And as I said, my father, suffered from travel restrictions too. My mother did. My siblings, now me, and my nephews and nieces. It's generational. The concept of generational trauma, the psyche also of living under travel restrictions and surveillance is, people do not understand that when, for example, in Gaza we have drones hovering over our heads 24/7, and the noise they produce and the fact that you feel your privacy is violated. You cannot, like, you're watched. We have a joke in Gaza that the Israelis know whether, we're going to cook fresh meat or frozen meat, because they know the details, the tiny details of our lives. But also the fact that I grew up in Block A in Gaza. So Gaza is the biggest open air prison in the world, as you said. But I also grew up, my family grew up in what used to be literally a British prison during the First World War called Block A,
Block A.
where some captured soldiers, I think from the Ottoman army, were kept there. So the gate in and out to that prison is actually the actual gate of the refugee community now. So this is the only way to get in and out. Like imagine growing up there in what used to be a prison, in the biggest open air prison in the world. And I remember, always when I was young, Israeli soldiers, patrol units would always station soldiers at the entrance of the refugee community, Block A, watching us and checking our belongings and sometimes breaking into our houses and humiliating Palestinians. There was this time when they stopped my father and they asked him to dance in front of everyone. And this was very common where they would humiliate Palestinians and ask them to clean the dirt or dance in the street. And my father had no option because if he said no, then they would literally beat him, and no one knows what's going to happen to him next. Like he might be shot or arrested. He had to agree to their demands, and but he was very smart. He asked them to clap for him, and once they started clapping, he ran away. They couldn't capture him, and they became the joke of the refugee camp. But again, these funny stories are also sad, and it shows the generational aspect of these travel restrictions of divide and rule, settler colonialism in place. It's just a basic settler colonialism guidebook I think Israel is practicing, where our families, I have relatives in many corners of the world, Palestinians who were displaced in 1948, now living in the Arab Gulf, in Europe, and in Turkey, and in Jordan, in the West Bank, and Gaza, everywhere. Like we were divided, and the split that took place in 1948 only started then, and it's still going on. It's still impacting our lives. So we should also talk about Gaza and Palestine, the slow death of Palestinians when there is no offensives and wars. Solidarity should not be seasonal with the Palestinian people because as we speak, the Palestinian people are suffering. Israel is breaking into houses and refugee camps and bombing Gaza and the West Bank and killing Palestinians and arresting Palestinians on daily basis. I mean, it doesn't matter whether these Palestinians are purely Palestinians or Palestinian Americans, for example, such as the case of Palestinian American journalist Shireen Abu Akleh, who was killed 6 months ago by an Israeli sniper. And they get away with it because they know there is no punishment. There are no, implications and consequences for their actions. So they have to be brought accountable. And every day, Israel is turning more towards the right. If we look at the results of the most recent elections, Netanyahu is back.
Yeah.
Uh, so we don't know what this means for Palestinians, but definitely it's bad news for Palestinians who will. We have Itmar Ben Gvir in the Israeli government who always likes to hang out with a pistol or a gun, threatening Palestinians of house demolitions and executing Palestinian political prisoners and threatening them of reliving Nakba again, of sending them in buses, like literally threatening Palestinians who live in Israel, who are supposedly citizens of Israel, of sending them back to the West Bank and Jordan, just as they did in 1948 when they kicked Palestinians out, as displaced them and made them refugees. So I think it's important. Also, the world will be able to see how the Israeli society is turning towards the right, but again, the implications for Palestinians on the ground will be serious. We will see more, settler attacks and uprooting Palestinian trees, olive trees, throwing stones at Palestinian cars. That's happening every day in the West Bank. No one is talking about this. It's just a daily hell that Palestinians live every day.
All right, Yusuf. Just for it's easy for you to describe that. I just want try to make people in Malaysia understands what you are going through. Some people they just cannot imagine. One thing that Malaysians you need to understand that there are two laws. For Palestinian, they are under military law. So basically, they are at the mercy of the military. You know, when you go to military tribunal, so just basically the military will be the judge and prosecutors of your case. So there is
Yeah.
not much that you can get your lawyers and everything. The worst thing is, one is the soldiers, and another is the settlers. The settlers can really, every day, even for small kid, they want to go to school. I got a video every day. We're talking every day going to school. They have to pass how many, one or two checkpoints going back. So every time the soldiers can humiliate you. If you pass the soldiers, they will ask for all kind of documents. The settlers also sometimes will throw stone at you, will spat at you, and the military will protect the Israeli settler. You know, so this is kind of humiliation that people have to go through. If you
Yeah.
scream, if you fight back, you go to their military court, you'll be to blame. They will ask you confession, they will beat you. I mean, this is a thing that people need to understand what people like Yusuf have to go through every day, and it's still continuing until now. This is
No,
people need to understand.
the Israeli legal system was designed by settlers for the settlers, and it's never fair. Um, when
It's
it comes to their treatment of the Palestinian people. So yes, there are two different systems: the military system where Palestinians are tried and brought before court, and the Israeli system. For example, in the West Bank, where Palestinians and Israeli settlers live in the same area, they have two different legal systems. One for Israeli settlers that is civic, one for Palestinians that is military, including for Palestinian children. So there is a special system, military system, for Palestinian children. And the way the discrimination and the conviction rate is just unbelievable. 99% of cases brought before the Israeli military system of Palestinians get conviction. And this is the exact opposite when it comes to Israelis attacking Palestinians. Um, Also, there is a distinction when it comes to the age of Palestinians. So, according to Israeli law, Palestinian children are those under the age of 16, while Israeli children are those under the age of 18 who live in the same area, but because they happen to be Palestinians. So, the conviction rate is very high, and there is no much space to where Palestinians can defend themselves, including Palestinian children. We have in the book the story of the five Haris boys. Haris is a village in the West Bank in Silfit, and actually the Israeli army just broke into the village again yesterday or the day before yesterday, and they were searching people. Where five Palestinian children at the time were convicted of throwing stones at an Israeli car, which resulted in a serious injury of an Israeli settler who later lost her life. And there was this Israeli truck driver, who hit the car, though, so the settler car. But he claimed that the reason he hit the car is because some people he did not know threw stones at him. And then he kept changing his narrative. But the Israeli military court took his narrative for granted, and five children who denied that they had any involvement in this stone throwing incident were convicted to 15 years in a prison, and they're still in jail. I think that was like 10 years ago. They're still in jail. They grew up in jail. This is the life of Palestinian prisoners. You do not have the chance to defend yourself. The whole system is against you, including judges, who many of them are settlers.
So you see, this is the under military court. The Malaysian, we have not been into such what we have to go through. It. Sometimes people they cannot really imagine that you have to go through. I think this is 21st century. This is not 19. It's not 1912 or 1914. This is 21st century. There are still a country under total military occupation. But I
Yeah.
don't even South Africa. I don't think there is that military occupation. That's just bit probably apartheid discrimination. But this one is under military, proper military, and there are four types of Batustan, whatever the segregation that they put in, and this totally different than how. Yeah, and just like I said, man, probably you can go into that. I just want to know how do you go out from Gaza? I mean, is it uh, Gaza to probably to Egypt? Is it easy for people to travel out to Egypt
So
than to West Bank,
the vast majority um, of
even to Malaysia?
Palestinians,
So, yeah,
yeah, the vast majority of Palestinians in Gaza travel through Egypt and Rafah
Rafah,
because
yeah.
they're not allowed to travel through Israel in the first place. And the crossing has been open, but the journey is long. For the past 2 years, it's been open. Um, but you
Is there
have to
any
have a
limit?
reason.
So how many people can go out daily basis? Is it easy to go out
So there's almost like 500 to 600 people who can travel on daily basis.
daily
So
basis?
the queue is long and it takes time, and you have to have a reason. Like, you have to have a visa. For example, you cannot travel. Uh, Most likely, if you do not have a visa, you're not allowed to travel. You have to have a reason why you're traveling. It's not like, for example, other people who can travel just because they want to have fun. Um,
Okay, this
and
is all. You have to go through the Palestinian Authority only. Probably Hamas is checking that. Not you don't have to go through Israeli permission to go to Egypt to Rafah border.
no, Israel is not involved in this process. It's involved in the travel of Palestinians from the West Bank to Jordan. So Palestinians have to cross a checkpoint by the Palestinian Authority, then Israel, then Jordan. So Israel has the final say. If they want to send someone back, or if they do not want to receive someone coming back from Jordan, they're in between, they're in the middle, and they can send people back. Um, this is not the case in Gaza, where Israel withdrew from Gaza in 2005, and there was an agreement that allowed Israel to have a sort of monitoring role through cameras over people's movement in and out of Gaza. But this came to an end. So it was brokered by the EU until 2007, and then it came to an end. The situation at the Rafah crossing went through different stages, but now it's been open for the past 2 or 3 years, I guess, and people who have a reason, like papers or visas or work visas or foreign passports, um, can travel.
But this Rafah border is solely under Palestinian. Not you don't have to go through Israeli permission.
No,
In that sense. No,
it's
that's
fully
okay.
Palestinian.
That's okay.
It's controlled by Hamas, and it's fully Hamas and Palestinians on the Palestinian side, and Israel
Only
is not involved as well.
only the West Bank that you have to get Palestinian and Israel permission for you to go out from West Bank. Is it
Yes,
even for you to go back? Because I heard for people to go back to Palestine, they might end up in a probably in a jail first in a prison before they can see their family probably 2 3 years. A Palestinian
I mean,
Authority will lock
yeah. In
them
the
out.
West Bank, there are cases where some people were arrested, including students who were studying abroad,
Yeah, abroad. Yeah.
or people who were like questioned and about their activities or their education, and uh, just a different process.
All right. Because I heard for people in West Bank, even they got scholarship, they also have to get Israeli permission. Sometimes they just turn it down. They don't allow you
Yeah,
to go out for no reason.
yeah. There are people who are not allowed to travel out of the West Bank, and
Okay.
of course, this applies to students too. So if they have a scholarship or an education opportunity outside, if Israel says no, then it's no. They lose it.
Yeah. Okay. I just want to know whether for any birth and death, so who keep track of all the Palestinian? Do they also keep track on the Palestinian as the refugees in Jordan, in Syria, or whatnot? So who keep track of all the population? Is there any proper registry that you know?
So for Palestinians living in refugee camps in other Arab countries, UNRWA, the United Nations
Okay.
Agency for Palestine Refugees, is responsible for the birth
Patient.
registry. In the West Bank, the Palestinian Authority is responsible for it. And
Mm-hmm.
then, like, the Palestinian Authority in Gaza, that is Hamas,
Okay.
is responsible for Gaza. But in the West Bank and Gaza, both authorities cannot issue IDs for people who are not approved to be legal citizens of Gaza and the West Bank from Israel or from the Israeli side. So Israel has the final say over the population registry. For example, if we have a Palestinian who decided to come to Gaza on a visit, um, if they do not have the Gaza ID or the West Bank ID, they would not be allowed into Gaza or the West Bank. Like, as a Palestinian from Gaza, I cannot go to the West Bank without a permit, even though my ID, my passport allows me to. For Palestinians who do not have these IDs in the first place, they have to apply for permits. And if they decide to stay, and we have thousands of them who decided to stay after they came on a visit, after obtaining a permit that was given to them by Israel, they're not officially recognized as Palestinians. They do not have the Palestinian national ID. So basically, they cannot travel in and out of Gaza and the West Bank. And Israel would approve some names for family unification, meaning giving these people IDs every a few years. So my friend had to stay, for example, his father came on a visit from Jordan just before the second Palestinian Intifada broke out in 2000. He was in Gaza for like almost 21 years, unallowed to travel because Israel did not issue him an ID. So practically, the ID is printed out in Gaza and the West Bank, but without Israeli approval. If your father, your parents do not have this ID, you cannot get it unless you get an Israeli approval. So to wrap up, Israel has the final say over the Palestinian civil registry in Gaza and the West Bank.
Okay. Okay, if you have any questions, so those watching on FB and probably on BDS YouTube, you can write a comment in the chat box. So I'll pass it to Brother Yusuf. Um, this is all aside before we go to conclude on this thing. I just want to know what's basically the main economy and employment. I heard that even in Gaza, I'm not so sure about West Bank and Palestine as a whole, but in Gaza, the unemployment rate about I think about 60%. So in many
Yeah,
economy,
especially
how do you have economy? If you know, how do you see you study and you have to such very high figure of employment that's give you you know it kill all your
potential.
hopes for you to get employment. So that's very hard for
So
people.
literacy rate in Gaza is 98%, 98.5%. So it's very
Wow,
high, and
very high.
there are hundreds of thousands of people with degrees. But again, finding a job is a challenge, and job opportunities are not available for many people. The unemployment rate, especially among young people, could go up to 80%. So it's between like 50 and 60%, but especially among young people, it's really high. And there are a lot of people who try to survive, do online jobs, especially the IT community in Gaza, which is thriving, working with other, companies outside, or having their own co-working spaces. Because again, even finding these places where you have stable internet connection, electricity 24/7 is a challenge in itself, because electricity goes off in Gaza for 12, sometimes 16 hours a day. So unemployment is very high, and there was this recent report by the ICRC, the International Committee of the Red Cross, where in which hundreds of young people were surveyed in Gaza, and 80% of them said they do not have hopes that they will find a job in the next 15 years. So unemployment is really high, especially in Gaza. And this is the result of years of siege and squeezing the people of Gaza, where like it's like caging a cat. And then when this cat starts scratching, you open the door a little bit. And this is what Israel has been doing recently. They've been giving thousands of people from Gaza, especially young people who are married as a condition, permits to work in Israel as cheap laborers, because they know a lot of people are in need for these jobs now after years of like 15 years of crushing Palestinians in Gaza. So the economy is really bad. It's been collapsing since time, you know,
How
memorial.
about they pay you in shekel? Is it the currency?
Yeah, so the currency is shekel because we are under Israeli control and under Israeli occupation. But there are also other currencies that are used in Gaza, but at a much less level. And they're used, for example, UNRWA people, workers get paid in US dollar. There's some private sector people who get paid in euros, and some people who use Jordanian dinars. But the main currency, day-to-day dealings, are conducted in Israeli shekel. So this is like the currency you find in people's pockets if they have it in every day-to-day life dealings. So yeah, we use the Israeli shekel, and even there's some during some times I remember we suffered from the lack of the Israeli shekel in the market because Israel did not allow enough amounts of like change to get in during holidays. And so the whole thing, the whole Palestinian banking system is also under Israeli watch and control.
I forgot his name, but there is one Palestinian who live in United States. He's proposing of using Bitcoin as a tool to get away from this Israeli shackles. So that's one way of, you know, I'm not too sure. He got. I think he presented some papers on this thing. It's quite interesting how. So what do you think of
Yeah,
that?
I think yeah, this could be an idea, but again, Bitcoin is not accessible to everyone, and even Bitcoins, they're not like completely not watched by Israel. Israel watches everything, and I think, as I said, it's a matter of access, and whether people can actually have full access to Bitcoin in Gaza is questionable. How to manage like dealings, because Bitcoin is very expensive too. Like
Yeah,
if you want to buy like small things, how to do
from
that is
yeah.
also a challenge.
But I think it's one of the big challenge also the electricity that the Israel bomb. So you don't have
Yeah,
that 24/7. So it's very hard for you to work in the IT.
yeah,
But that's also me you. That's so one things that probably people can explore if you want to hire people in Gaza to work in the IT. But probably the international community can work into restoring a proper electricity, so you can get a 24/7 kind of very stable
yeah,
electricity. And probably the second thing that is quite critical in Gaza, I think, is the water. That is, it's they said until it's not fit for consumption in 2020. Now we are 2 years beyond that date. That Noah have as
yeah. So
presented. So
96% of Gaza's water is unfit for human consumption. And the whole water system is also controlled by Israel, because if we look at the stream, the water stream, it comes from the north. So Israel has built dams at the like just inside the northern borders of Gaza to control the water stream and the Palestinian aquifer. And imagine like a situation where 96% of water is unfit for a human consumption. People have to buy water, and we can also imagine what it means to buy water in a place like Gaza, where people, a lot of people cannot afford, to do that. Even though it's a small amount of money, but this small amount of money means a lot to many families who are barely surviving. Um, and again, the population growth in 1948, Gaza had only 100,000 people. Overnight, the number tripled because of the influx of Palestinian refugees from the greater Gaza area and southern Palestine. The population became 300,000 in 1948 over a few weeks. So we can imagine how, natural resources, water, housing was under huge pressure then. But let's imagine Gaza. Today we have 2.3 million Palestinians in Gaza. There are almost 6,000 babies born every month in Gaza. So in 10 years, the population will hit 3 million. So from 300,000 to 3 million people, we have to think about ways, sustainable ways of keeping Gaza alive, basically. In the education sector, in the health sector, infrastructure, housing, water, having green play. I mean, Gaza looks like a concrete jungle, and I think if anyone from Gaza would visit Malaysia, the first observation they will have is that Malaysia is too green. Yes, it's too green, but because also Gaza looks like a concrete jungle, we do not get to see green areas in Gaza because all these orange groves and olive trees, much of them were cut down to meet the demand of the growing population. They want, people are in need of building more houses. And this comes at the expense of agricultural land because Gaza has never been, expanded. It actually has been shrinking. This is not the actual size of the Gaza Strip that existed in 1948. Almost 150 kilometers, which were designated as buffer zones, were cut from Gaza in 1950, and Israel took over this land eventually over the years. So Gaza actually has been shrinking while the population has been increasing every year, and no one is talking about solutions or the natural growth of Palestinians there. They always talk about the natural growth of Israeli settlers or settlements in the West Bank, but not Palestinians in Gaza. So we have to think of creative ways of meeting the needs of the population that is based on empowerment rather than aid. Because I think the Palestinian people, including those in Gaza, can always provide solutions to the world. There is a high percentage of educated people. They can provide, also can give something to the world, not just take from the world. But again, this is the situation today in Gaza. It's we rarely get to see green areas, and I mean, if you look at houses and refugee camps, there are 8 refugee camps in Gaza, and in Jabalia refugee camp, there are 100 and probably 10,000 Palestinians living in 1 square kilometer. In my refugee camp, there are almost 100 and also 20,000 Palestinians living in 9 square kilometers. So it's very crowded. There is a high competition over resources, limited resources, and the agricultural land is shrinking. Not only this, after, I mentioned the example of where almost 1/4 of Gaza was cropped and cut down and attached to Israel after it was designated as a non-militarized zone. Now Israel is also imposing new buffer zones in Gaza. I mean, 1/3 of Gaza's agricultural land, the most fertile land to the east of Gaza, is designated as a buffer zone. So Palestinians are not allowed to have many buildings there. The Palestinian farmers always get shot at. Israel would bomb these lands, and in the sea, it's also the same situation. We have another buffer zone in the sea where Palestinian fishermen cannot fish in many cases at more than 3 or 6 nautical miles, and we have many cases of fishermen who were shot or injured or killed while making their living.
Okay, there is this statement I think from UNRWA that the Israeli allow just enough calories to Gaza, not to kill them all, but
Yeah,
just for you to survive, but barely survive, something like that. So
yeah.
I
It
think
was
I think
revealed by
yeah.
Isha. It's the same organization that helped my mother get a permit to see her family in the West Bank. It's an Israeli human rights organization where an Israeli military officer revealed that the number of calories getting into Gaza is calculated so that Palestinians do not starve. So just to keep them alive, they do not
Yeah.
have, like full access to food, but at the same time, they should not like starve and die. So like
True.
it's a balance between this and that.
Yeah. Yeah. So those things, I think the most critical is probably the water. Like I said, it's just very critical. Then from that polluted water, can create more health problem issues for people in Gaza, and they don't have really a proper medical facilities, and they have like electricity, and they have also growing population. Like you said, you don't imagine 10 years time how that kind of population, like there's no electricity, there's more babies. so, so and where you gonna house all these people, so that is all the pressing issues in Gaza, and it's not to add all those humiliations under military occupation that we cannot really imagine that people have to go through, because now the topic is travel restriction, under a settler colonialism. I think settler colonialism is a bit too soft in certain sense, no. Under military colonialism, just people knows that who you're dealing with, people with gun and stuff like that. You have to go to past them. Even there's one person guy I saw in a YouTube. They say sometimes the soldiers can ask you for you to go back to your house. They ask you, to strip naked, they can do that. They can
Yeah.
humiliate you like that to all Palestinians. So this is the life that they have to go through. And for those people who don't know, but still, I think Palestinian people are very, very strong people. They have, but probably, how do you see this? Probably it's about cap. It's about 1 hour now, Yusuf. But we will love to hear from you. It's a bit more detailed. Probably, I just want people to know outside there knows that these people are just not names and numbers. No, they are people. Which they are living. Probably we can share really personal. But some people, like last week I spoke with Muslim, but some people they don't want to share about personal stories. But I know you like to share about personal stories. To me, that is very good. You can narrate it, give it some pictures. How these people have to go through. Give examples. These are people. They're just not numbers. So people can imagine living in that kind of unimaginable condition. So how do you see your future? Then how people like us, the free people outside Palestine, can help Palestinian? In your words.
I think it's important to, when we talk about Palestine, that we center the conversation around Palestinian refugees and what happened in 1948, the Palestinian Nakba.
Yeah.
Even when we talk about Gaza today, because we cannot look at Gaza in isolation from what is happening in the rest of Palestine. It's a continuation of the same system of oppression. Um, and I mean, if we talk about travel restrictions, uh, it's, I think, doable to lift these travel restrictions. It's possible and doable. Um, and to connect as a Palestinian people and a Palestinian family is doable and possible. We had the Great March of Return from Gaza in 2018, and this was a call of hope. It's also centered the conversation about Palestinian refugees, whether in Gaza or outside Gaza. That Gaza is not is not an isolated entity. Um, 70% of Gaza's population are refugees, including my family. We have 8 refugee camps in Gaza. We should not start the narrative from second. It should start from first when
So
Palestine.
sorry, when you say refugee camp, what do you mean by refugee camp in Gaza?
So these are initially they were tents built by the Quakers, which
Tent.
is a Christian group from the US and the UK that helped Palestinian refugees at the time. But then UNRWA took over in 1950 and these tents started expanding. So that's where Palestinians ended up in these camps, tents, then, and but over time, these tents became buildings because some Palestinians thought they will be away, for 1 week and then they will be back. We have stories of Palestinians who thought they will be back like the next day,
Mm-hmm.
but they were not allowed to go back, although the UN General Assembly called for that in its resolution number 194. But Israel doesn't allow Palestinian refugees to go back. So Palestinians settled in these refugee camps. Buildings started, but they are very crowded. Like the space is very limited. So they started building on the top of each other or next to each other. There is no space. The infrastructure is not good. Sewage, water. So services wise, these refugee camps suffer from many challenges. But over time, they have developed but they're still very crowded, no space, no green areas. And Palestinians thought they will become refugees for like 1 or 2 days and then they will be back. They never thought it would be permanent.
Yeah.
But then this is the situation now, 40 years down the road. 74 years down the road, they're still in these refugee camps. And the same applies for the West Bank. There are 19 refugee camps in the West Bank of Palestinians who became refugees inside their own homes. In their homeland.
Okay.
My family doesn't come from Gaza, for example.
Okay. Um. Okay. By God grace, by inshallah, if God willing, inshallah, Palestine will be free. So, if you were to be the future free Palestine prime minister, what are the conditions that is acceptable if you wanted to negotiate? And this is my personal question to you. Let's say one day Israel will say, no, we are sorry. We're gonna give what you want. You think is a fair settlement for Palestine. Let's say one day they will come
I
to.
do not aspire to become a politician one day, but as a
For you,
Palestinian
but
on the ground, a
on personal
Palestinian
basis,
refugee,
what is acceptable a peace solution for you from the Israeli side?
I think equal rights.
Equal
Our
rights.
conversation and narrative should be centered around equal rights
Okay.
and allowing Palestinian refugees to go back to their towns and villages.
Okay.
And when we talk about Palestine, we also talk about Palestinians in the diaspora. So it's not only Palestinians in Gaza and the West Bank and Jerusalem.
Okay. Okay.
Every single Palestinian has the right to be in their homeland and to have equal rights. Any conversation that strays away from this line will not help the Palestinian people.
So that sounds more like what BDS is asking for
Exactly.
basically
So
and all the military occupation, dismantle all those walls. Second is very give equal rights for Palestine and Israel in that certain sense. And the third one is basically give right of return to all refugees in diaspora.
yeah,
Go back. I mean, at least they have the options, or probably if you cannot accommodate, there must be some kind of compensation that you have to give to them. I mean,
I
I don't
mean,
know whether you can allow 6 or 7 million people to go back into
I mean,
into
this should be the case because these are the owners of the land.
yeah.
Maybe some of them may not choose to go back now, but they
Yeah.
should always enjoy this right, have the right to go back whenever they want to.
Okay. So this is basically the three options. So in that sense, only then you can can I say, can you recognize Israel in that sense when we're giving a full
I mean, if this happens, Israel will not remain Israel that we know today.
yeah, the moment that they give you
Palestinians will become the majority
yeah.
between Mediterranean and the Jordan River, and people who choose to coexist peacefully then will figure out a system and name it the way they want. So
Okay. So that's basically the three conditions that as BDS proposed that is acceptable to you, and how they're gonna live in that situation. Like you said, some kind of peace guarantee between you that is that you have to talk to them in that sense. Correct.
yeah,
So
yes,
okay. Alhamdulillah. Thank you for watching. So I think we need international world. We need to give. Voice to power to Palestinian people who didn't have the luxury of speaking out. So Palestine needs our voice and help where we can. With that, thank you very much, Brother Yusuf. Inshallah, we'll call you again to talk about probably some of your book. Often, I like to talk about those probably can narrate, give some stories to the dreaming of freedom. All those probably got pictures of the people, so people know firsthand what these individual people have to go through every days in Palestine. All right,
thank you
thank you
for
very
having
much. Assalamu alaikum. Don't forget to to subscribe. Probably you can have like BDS. We try to every 2 weeks, first and third Saturday, about 1 hour. We're going to talk about Palestine and highlight what are the current issues that we promote. Okay, Brother Yusuf. Thank you very much. Assalamu alaikum.
thank you.
All right, thank you.